All right, guys, today's lesson is on who were the major leaders of the Civil War and what did they contribute. I'm sending you 2 pages. One is a page of notes and one is a worksheet. The wind's blowing. The first page is the page of notes. I'm going to turn it around so you can see it. And it looks like this. You've got Abraham Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, Thomas Stonewall Jackson, and Frederick Douglass. Most of these men you should be familiar with. Frederick Douglass we spoke about before in a different lesson. So the first leader was, of course, Abraham Lincoln. This whole Civil War erupted when Abraham Lincoln was elected president. And his accomplishments, to name a few, in 1862, September 22nd, 1862, he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation that told all of the Confederate states that if they did not come back into the Union as of January 1st, 1863, he was going to free all the slaves. Didn't affect the Confederate states at all because they weren't part of the Union and they thought that Lincoln couldn't tell them what to do. But it did help free the slaves when the Civil War was over and the southern states had to rewrite their constitutions to outlaw slavery to become part of the Union again. His main idea for fighting the Civil War was not to stop slavery, but to preserve the Union. He wanted to keep the Union together. He believed on the slavery issue that he wasn't going to let slavery extend to the new territories, but he thought that he could not end slavery in the South. Okay, so he's what you call a free soiler. All the free soil to the west was not going to become slave territory, but he thought that the states in the South would keep slaves. He believed that the United States was a union, one nation, and not a collection of states. A lot of people in the South still wanted their states' rights. They were very prominent states, very connected politically, and they wanted their state to be more important than the Union. Lincoln didn't see it that way at all. He's also famous for writing the Gettysburg Address. And in that Gettysburg Address, after the Battle of Gettysburg, which was a 3-day battle, the bloodiest battle in the Civil War, so many men died there that Lincoln went up there and declared it a national cemetery where they buried a lot of those bodies. His famous speech starts with 407 years ago, which is 87 years ago, when our forefathers set out to start this great nation. That's how he starts the speech. In this speech, he says that the Civil War was to preserve a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. So that's another famous quote by Lincoln. Jefferson Davis was the president of the Confederacy. The capital of the Confederacy was Richmond. Jefferson Davis lived in Richmond. He's not considered one of our presidents. He was never president of the United States or of the Union, but he was the only president of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis. Ulysses S. Grant was the last Union general, the general at the end, that won the Civil War. Robert E. Lee surrendered to him at Appomattox Courthouse. Ulysses S. Grant was not the only general in the Civil War for the Union. Lincoln went through many, many generals before he got to Ulysses S. Grant, and Grant will will be our next elected president after Lincoln. We know that in April of 1865, Lincoln was assassinated. His vice president, Johnson, became president. Johnson will not be elected again. Ulysses S. Grant will be elected as our 18th president. Lincoln was 16, Johnson 17, and then Grant will be 18. Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was general of the Army of Northern Virginia. He was a general in the Union Army until the Civil War started. Lincoln actually asked him to be the general of the Union Army, and Robert E. Lee said, "I can't. My family, my friends, they live in Virginia. I cannot fight against my home state and my people." But he was opposed to secession. He didn't think that any state should leave the Union, but he also thought the Union, the North, could not bring them back by force. This is something that had to be worked out. Obviously, it wasn't worked out with words. It was over a 4-year war. After the war was over and he surrendered at Appomattox Courthouse to Ulysses S. Grant, he urged Southerners to accept the defeat and come back together and reunite as Americans. Thomas Stonewall Jackson was a skilled Confederate general from Virginia. When we talked about the Battle of Bull Run, he was the general who made the Confederate troops not retreat when the Union troops started coming at them. And then all of a sudden, he made them stand like a stone wall. That's how he got his nickname. And then all of a sudden, they let out that rebel yell, and they started charging the Union troops. The Union troops turned around, ran up through the picnickers, and retreated. So that was a Confederate victory, and Stonewall Jackson had a lot to do with that. Frederick Douglass, also someone who spoke a lot during the Civil War at rallies and places like that. He was a former slave who was an abolitionist. He had escaped north. His newspaper, the North Star, helped a lot of African Americans, freed slaves and runaway slaves, get a start in the North. Okay, so the worksheet this week, which I dropped on the floor, looks like this. Let me turn this around here. It reviews the Civil War leaders that we just talked about, and it also reviews the battles that we talked about last time. Last week I sent you a sheet on the battles. This week I'm going to send you a note sheet on all of these people. That is the paper that needs to be completed this week. It's very simple. It's fill in the blank. It's a review. I'm going to put it on view. I'm going to put in LMS website, the classroom website, and in my email. Although a lot of people have been telling me that they can't open the worksheets from the email. But I'm going to try again. All right, guys, one more lesson to go. The last lesson is on how the Civil War changed the lives of soldiers, women, and slaves. Okay? Until I see you next time, stay safe. Bye.